as we look at the past, I would hope we can get inspired by looking at the craftsmanship and looking at the details and long to build better because we see beautiful things like this. Well, what prompted this era, right? Why did we go from, I talked about the arts and crafts period last time, but how do you go from this simple arts and crafts bungalow to, medieval France, right? What is the impetus? What happens? It's interesting. World War I, I said, ended in 1918, but a number of other technologies and stuff were really happening at this time that made this era possible. First of all, you have steamships, and travel to Europe became something that was easier. Okay, you could go to Europe in 7 to 15 days, whereas a sailing ship, remember, steamships and steam things really only start coming around in the early 1900s. And so, we were sailing to Europe before then, which seems funny. And it would take, months to 3 months to get across. It was very dangerous. You could, die on those trips. The ships could go down. The steamship and steamship travel really changed that. The train in America, train travel is the reason we can go to all these different parts of our country. And so travel becomes a really important thing. And these are just some of the travel posters that were advertising and promoting going to Rome, going to these different areas. And then World War II, World War I. It can't be, stressed enough how enchanting, Europe was to Americans. And there are numerous examples of architects and designers who go to France in World War I, serve in the thing, and then stay there or then return there because they were so enchanted. If you look at, I talked about this book from Samuel McIntyre. He was a artist and designer. He actually goes there and just starts drawing these beautiful medieval, rural towns in France, in Normandy, and they're just so enchanting. Got a cookie in my throat. And they're so beautiful, and they draw us in. And so if you can still get this book, but it's filled with pages and pages and pages of drawings of these enchanting towns and enchanting villages, and it draws us over there, and we long to emulate and build in this style, this enchanting style. John Staub, we're working on this Staub house here in Fort Worth, 1928, roughly. It's an English revival house. He goes over, serves in World War I. He goes back in the mid-20s and travels around Europe for a couple years getting inspiration. And he says that this element, this kind of gable end detail, was something he saw in England, couldn't forget, drew it up, and came back and built it in America. So this was happening over and over again. Charles Dilbeck was an architect who built in this kind of this French country style. I mean, he's a regional architect, Tulsa, Dallas, Fort Worth, but I'm not sure anyone I've seen captures, maybe the storybook style houses, captures the romance and, Hansel and Gretel kind of character that he captured in his houses with these, simple poles, a lot of hand-hewn architecture. These were his plans for his house. There was, it's interesting, Willis Winter, is that his name? Winter Willis? Willis Winter?
Willis.
Willis.
Willis Winter.
Thank you. He is writing a book on Dilbeck, and he was explaining that Dilbeck only had one book in his library, and it was this book, okay, which is just a bunch of pictures of France, okay, just a bunch of pictures of areas. One of the things that Dilbeck does in his house is he has this exterior stair, and you wonder, well, where did he get that? Well, if you go through the pictures in these books, the thatched roofs and the way he's holding up dormers and gable ends, he used this book as inspiration for how he was going to build. And so these romantic, this is a Dilbeck we're working on right now, his plans were so efficient, so compact, on 3 pages, like 3 pages this big. He had all of this detail laid out as far as how things should look. The scale of his windows, look at that small little dormer up there that really capture that look that you see in those Samuel McIntyre drawings or Samuel Chamberlain drawings and the pictures. He captured, as well as anybody, that medieval, early kind of design with unique details and unique elements. And I think America just fell in love with these things. The other thing is that everybody, and I mean everybody, the government, the architects, the manufacturers, was wrapped up in this, period revival styling. And so we're going to see, as we look at these different people, how everybody got involved. Ludovici, tile manufacturer, 1880s or 1870s is when they started. They started from 29 to 33. They did what was called the Tuileries. Okay, they're now you can buy them on eBay. They're put together in books. They're basically travel journals from architects. Samuel Chamberlain did one of these. I don't know if there's, but famous architects would write these things, and they would travel through different areas of Europe, writing about what they're seeing. Now, Ludovici was looking at it as a inspiration for roof tiles, an inspiration for how to build, right? But if you look at these, 10% of these, travel diaries are spent on the roofs. There are pictures of roofs there, but they're certainly not a study of a roof where you'd look at the size of the tile and the shape and when it was made or anything like that. So this is a love affair of, by Ludovici to, show off Europe and what was being built there. The White Pine Association started what's called the White Pine Monograph Series. These are excellent resources for colonial revival architecture in America. You can buy these on eBay. They come in these little packets. I've got collections that are rebound, but there are drawings and details of individual houses and what they would do. There's pictures, and they went around. I don't know if I've got it here. They started in the White Pine series, right? It was the White Pine Association for about 9 years there. They studied historic houses that had been built in white pine. So they were Massachusetts, all those New England states. Weyerhaeuser bought it, and they started studying more the southern states, not necessarily just white pine things. And then it became a part of Pencil Point magazines after that. But there is no better, well, this is a really good one. There's a bunch of good ones. But this White Pine series is a fascinating study of colonial architecture, again, put out by a manufacturer doing white pine. We got to consider that the government was involved in this, with the HABS surveys and the HABS studies. HABS is Historic American Building Surveys. They started in 1933. It was part of the, Get America Back to Work after the Great Depression. But architects would go around to great buildings and document them. And if you have, like, we did a study of Stan Hewitt, which is that house there in Ohio. There's a picture, HABS, Ohio, 5008, or whenever they did that. But there is no greater treasury of the architectural history in America than the HABS journals. And if you go on to, if you just type in HABS, all this HABS information will come up, and there's drawings, and there's pictures, and there's details. It's crazy how much information is there. We've done a number of great research projects through HABS because the information's so good. Private people were involved. Colonial Williamsburg. This was an effort. Rockefeller was the major donor here, but to recapture our first capital, which was at Colonial Williamsburg. And so they rebuilt this town, and there's a book that was written about the rebuilding of Williamsburg and how they rebuilt this city and this town. But the architectural documentation that was there, I was there about 2 or 3 years ago. People been to Colonial Williamsburg? Mm-hmm. If you haven't gone, okay, that's your next trip. It's fantastic. It is really a inspiring, encouraging place. I mean, little things like how they laid out the siding so that it lined up with the windowsill, and just the level of detail that they went to is fascinating and awesome. But there's great architecture there, great study of that, again, done by a private donor. Winter Tour. We talked about Winter Tour before. Who's been to Winter Tour? I know you have. The Alice. No one's been to Winter Tour but Lisa and Alice? Okay, get out. My word. Okay, Winter Tour is your next stop, okay? Basically, Henry DuPont fell in love with American antiques, okay? He started collecting them, and he would find out about a house in Philadelphia that was being torn down. He'd buy the parlor and install it in his house. And his house was started as a, 4,000, 6,000 square foot house. Ended up being over 100,000 square feet, 175 rooms from 1640 to 1860. He's captured everything that's pre-industrial in America. There's every colony is represented, every style is represented. You will see a very early house like this, wherever that's from. This one's from Maryland, a very high style house in 1760. This is probably 1720 or earlier. There's everything there. And if you are interested in architectural interiors, obviously there's furniture there. This is the finest collection of American antiques and antiquity in the world, okay? And you haven't been there! So you need to go. But that's, this was happening in the 20s too, right? So he started his collection in 21. He was collecting into the 50s. This is the place you need to go. Hollywood, right? We talked about the storybook style. Now, Hollywood Regency style is the 40s, 50s, 60s things. As Hollywood influence becomes even greater. But in the 20s and 30s, there was this, whimsical, magical, as I said, Hansel and Gretel kind of building that took place. But certainly, this was a style. This was happening. People were doing this stuff again, and there's this enchantment with medieval architecture in Europe. And how did we get here? That started with the question, what happened? I think we just kind of fell in love with this style and became enamored with it. And as you can see, everybody was, right? Everybody was looking at this thing. So, did I lose you? Talking to my sound man. The builders were involved, right? The things that they were selling were, period revival things. And their design, we'll talk about where their design came from, but wonderful period. This is 1929, 27, right? These are wonderful. I'd like to build that house today, right?